Yong, looking at the snow on South Mountain. The shady northern slopes of South Mountain are beautiful, with snow piled up to the floating clouds. The woods glow with that bright after-snow color. In town, the nights are growing colder. So, we continue with the 5-word quatrains. This is a poem by Yong. Now, Yong, we've already encountered him before in this anthology. He is not one of the most famous town poets. He is represented in this anthology with 2 pieces. One of them, we read it when we were in the heptasyllabic regulated poem section. He had a poem called The View from Jimen, which was basically a poem written in the northeastern area of China in the frontiers, and the subject matter pretty much connected with a more conventional genre, frontier poetry. Now, I think we mentioned when we read that poem that this was not the genre in which he was typecast. In fact, the poem that we've read today is more of that type. Very briefly, Yong was from, a little bit of biography, he was from Luoyang. He passed the examination for presented scholar in 724, but did not receive official appointment, and after waiting in the capital for a year, he returned home and spent the rest of his life as a private citizen. We don't know much about him except that, just like our previous poet, Beidi, he was a good friend of Wang Wei, and in a way, I think he became a representative of that sort of poetry about the retired life that is so typical not only of the classical scholar official, but especially of those scholar officials that don't manage to attain important posts. In a way, he is a little bit like Meng Haoran, who we will encounter again tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So, looking at the snow of South Mountain, this poem is going to be a poem about the landscape. So it's going, the title already establishes it pretty explicitly. A lot of these short quatrains tend to be landscape poems because, in the very short space of 4 lines and 5 characters per line, it is really difficult to develop any topic that isn't just, a small impressionistic view or a small impressionistic description of something in one couplet and the evocation of feelings in the other. It's a very short form, so it really doesn't allow for deep conceptual tricks. Although, sometimes there are 2 or 3 levels of readership in which the poem, which might be about superficially, description of nature, might have hidden meanings. My impression reading this poem is that this is just a straightforward poem describing a lovely view that is seen from the capital. South Mountain, Nanshan, I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's one of the mountains of the Chungnan mountain range, which was south of the capital, about 60 miles from Chang'an. So the view that is being described here might have been a view that, could be seen from the capital itself, looking southwards and seeing this big mountain still covered by snow. Perhaps the season, I don't think it's explicitly indicated in the poem in any way, but perhaps the season could be maybe autumn. I'm not sure if during the summer the peaks of the mountains in Chungnan are still covered by snow, and specifically South Mountain. Maybe they are, but anyway, I think the tone of the poem, the creeping coldness, seems to be pointing to an autumn or wintry setting. So looking at the snow, a big part of the poem is going to be impressionistic. Basically, it's going to describe what is seen by the poet. In this, I don't note any difference between the first and the second couplet, except for the first couplet really focuses on what the title says, the snow on South Mountain. The second couplet continues with other views related to or connected to the snow on the mountain, but surrounding it. So let's take a look at the couplets, as we said. First couplet. The shady northern slopes of South Mountain are beautiful, with snow piled up to the floating clouds. So looking at South Mountain from the north, one would see the northern slopes. In these northern slopes, you might imagine the highest peaks of South Mountain. They're described as shady and beautiful. Shady, the north is generally the shady area, the area that gets the least exposure to the sunlight. So it would logically be the area where the snow would last the longest. So we have this beautiful sight. We have snow piling up to the floating clouds. In some other translations of this poem, the idea is that, the snow is in a way confused with the clouds because, from the distance you just see the peaks covered in some whitish material surrounded by the haze. So there is this intricate interweaving of snow and clouds. Have the clouds rested on the mountain? No, is it not clouds? Is it just snow? Isn't the snow like floating on top of the tip of the mountain? This sort of elegant confusion was, a rather trite but well exploited as well topic in, for example, Six Dynasties poetry, and I imagine it's being continued here up to a point. But anyway, we get just this beautiful sight, looking south from the capital, looking at the north side of the South Mountain. One sees its peak covered with snow, and that snow diffuminating, mixing with the mist and the clouds that are floating high, creating this union between heaven and earth. Like, remember, mountains are always a bit like axis mundi, like spears rising up into heaven and connecting earth and heaven. Second couplet. The woods glow with that bright after snow color. In town, the nights are growing colder. So the second couplet seems to be taking us down from the mountain. So first it takes us to the woods, which we might imagine would be woods in the lower range of the mountain, probably, or in the surrounding area. And lower still, you would have the town, the villages maybe at the foot of the mountain. Or perhaps even the capital itself, although if the translator has used the word town, I imagine he is not using a character that is compatible with the capital. So the images are still visual. The image in the first couplet was visual. Yeah, the white snow, like clouds on top of the peak. So in the second couplet we get the woods, and the woods are glowing. So they are reflecting light. It says, they're glowing with the bright after snow color. What is the bright after snow color? I've thought of two things. Perhaps, but white snow reflects light. So perhaps what is being described here is how those forests close to the snow but lower than the snow at the foot of the mountain are glowing in their presumably green or brown or reddish colors if it's autumn. And the reflected light from the snow illuminates them and gives them this beautiful after-snow color. Another possibility might be that the snow in the lower range of the mountains where the forests are has melted. So after the snow, the true colors, the greens, the reds, shine forth from until then had been a white mantle hiding their colorful background. Anyway, there's this connection with the snow is beautiful and the forest is shining and beautiful as well. And finally, the last image. In town, the nights are growing colder. I would say this is the line that makes me feel that this is an autumn poem. Because, in a winter poem, you don't say the nights are getting colder. The nights are as cold as can be. But in autumn, the nights are getting colder. Well, it could be spring as well, but there's no spring element, really. So that beautiful snow in that after-snow forest, probably with reds, if this is autumn, more than greens, or a combination of reds and greens. It's heralding autumn. We get a seasonal element here. Finally, in the last line, these beautiful sights also open the door to something that is not visual or not necessarily beautiful, but it's, an indication of the consequences of this coolness, which shows itself in beautiful sights, but also in oral impressions that are not necessarily likable. Like the town. In the town, the nights are growing colder. It's cold. It's getting colder and colder. Winter is coming. So, short poem, and I think that's it. It doesn't have any particular resonances that I am able to detect. Just a description of a lovely sight, probably during the autumn and seen from the capital.